So all the products that we've talked about in this class are available for free except for Dreamweaver. And the popular acronym for it now is XAMPP. Used to be LAMPP, but what these things end up standing for now is the X stands for meaning cross-platform. So this service will run on Windows or Linux or Apple operating systems, and probably a few other ones too. So it used to be an L for Linux, and it was referred to as LAMP technology, LAMPP. And then the Apache server, the Apache web server, that would be software that you can install on your PC. And if you turned it on, basically what's happening is there's a process running on your computer that's checking constantly to see if anybody wants to get a web page from your computer. So you would configure your Apache, it's not too hard to do, you would configure your Apache service on your computer once you installed it to be constantly looking for somebody coming to your computer asking for web pages. You could also install a Mysql Database on your computer, and that could be used by your web server to record information and read from the database. And then two popular programming languages that you could use for creating web pages: PHP, which is code that you embed into your HTML file, and those will get translated dynamically. I'll go over a little demonstration for that. And then if you had a really big task to happen, if somebody went to your web page and hit a button and it was supposed to perform a really big task, rather than embedding that into one of your web pages, you could just make a separate program for that. And that's typically done in Perl. Most of what you can do in the Perl programming language you can do in PHP, but it's usually just done to keep things separately. So this acronym, XAMPP, sometimes it's pronounced as XAMPP, and sometimes it's pronounced as XAMPP. But it's something you can download. It's basically all the things that we're using to create websites all packaged together in one download. So you can go out to the internet, do a search on XAMPP. You could probably still do a search on LAMPP when it used to be just for Linux operating systems, but now it can be done on Windows machines. And this is, again, what it's used for. And the X, the A, the M, and the two P's. And the other thing is now there's a programming language called Python, and sometimes you'll see in the description the two P's could be PHP and Python, or PHP and Perl, or sometimes you might see XAMPP. So it's a new programming language that is popular for website design. And this is their logo, so when you go out to the internet looking for them, that's the logo that they tend to use. And then once it's installed on your PC, you'll see that icon on your PC. You just click. Basically, you end up, once it's installed, it's very easy to install. Once you install it, you click on that. You can just say Start Apache Server, Start MySQL, Start the PHP process. So just a little history about each one. The Apache HTTP server first became available in 1995, and it's was playing a key role in the growth of the World Wide Web. And just some interesting facts might be in 2009 it became the first web server software to surpass the 100 million website milestone. So it's being used now. It's getting close to 200 million websites currently using it. And as of March of 2012, Apache is estimated to serve 57% of all websites and 65% of the top servers across all domains. And here's the website if you want to just go to get the download of Apache. But like I say, it's bundled together now in that XAMPP package. MySQL is another product that came out in 1995. I think this came out of a company in Sweden. And I think they've been recently bought by Oracle, which is, no, not Oracle, Sun Microsystems, which is, but it still remains to be a free software that you could download. And so it's sometimes pronounced MySQL and sometimes pronounced, this SQL is pronounced as SQL sometimes, so people call it MySQL. And the SQL part stands for Structured Query Language, which was a language invented by IBM, I think, in 1984 for bigger database systems. So just a quick example, I think we've done some of this in our class, but you can, the language SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language, the Q part's a little debatable because you can do things besides querying a database. You can push data into a database and update data that's in a database. And that's not necessarily querying, that's actually updating. But anyway, we'll stick with SQL as the name of the language. And you can ask a database questions like, give me, so basically when you query a database, you're asking for a report. And the report comes out as kind of like a rectangular table, like like an Excel spreadsheet. But the tables that are in your database, there could be many tables, and the tables could be related to each other. So you could say, I want the email addresses and the first names of all from my tables called customers and from appointments. Now in this case, and we'll discuss how to create databases and design databases later, but maybe there's a customers table and an appointments table, and in the customers table we might have the first name and the email address might be in the appointments table. But these two tables will have something in common so that we'll know that this customer maps to this appointment. And then we could say something like where the field in the appointments table might have a column called date, and the date equals a certain date. So let's say, for example, we had a website and we wanted to know all the customers who have an appointment for today because the building's on fire and we want to send them an email saying they can't come in for their appointment. So we might want to run a report. We might want to ask the database, give me all the people who have an appointment today. I need their email address and I want their first name so I could say, dear so-and-so, your appointment's been canceled. So we would query the database. This is a language we can use to ask questions to our collection of tables, and it gives out a report. So then what we'd have to do, we could see the report with our eyes, but if this was a website asking for this report, we'd have to kind of read this and then in some kind of a programming language, parse these answers into certain fields, and then based on the field, we would start constructing emails to send out. Okay, so just while we're still on the topic of databases, there are other database systems besides MySQL. Popular ones are Oracle, which is made by the Oracle company makes the Oracle Database Server. Sybase makes a product called Sybase. Microsoft makes SQL Server. Microsoft also makes Access. You've probably seen Access in your Microsoft Office suite. And then IBM has a very popular database called DB2. And they created DB2 was what IBM created the SQL language for. And then that language became very popular and started showing up in other databases. So MySQL, which is the free version, is used all over the internet, and these are some of the most famous sites that still use it to this day. Google uses it, but they don't do their searching. They call, different teams do this search. Their searching software is not done using in a database called MySQL. It uses a different database. But Wikipedia uses MySQL, Facebook uses MySQL, and Twitter uses MySQL. So it used to be, a few years ago, it used to be like a database package you'd use to kind of get your website up and running. But, and then, as your website got bigger, you would migrate over to one of the non-free ones, like Oracle or Sybase. But it seems like a lot of these very intensive and large database systems still stay with MySQL, so it pretty much does the job for you. PHP also came out in 1995. The first iteration of it came out in 1995, and it's a general purpose server-side scripting language used for creating dynamic content in web pages. When PHP originally came out, I think it was by a student somewhere in Scandinavia, originally PHP stood for Personal Home Page. And then as time went on, it changed to become, the first P stands for Personal Home Page, and then the H was for hypertext, and then the next P was for preprocessor. So I'll just go over a little, I'll show you a little dynamic scripting thing, how that actually works. But what we end up doing is we take standard HTML code, and if your file is a PHP file, there's now this additional tag that we can add. So for example, this would be an HTML file. Everything in black is standard HTML, and what's new is this PHP chunk of code, we're calling it, and it'll print something like Wednesday the 15th. So we can call this as a PHP function, and then these are parameters we can add in to have it print out our date in a certain format that we like. We could have the day of the week, the day of the month, what year, minutes, seconds, anything we want, we could put in different features. And so this web page will print out whatever the date is. So the idea here is that whatever we put in here will be dynamically built at the moment the web page is asked for. So if you came to this page today, it might say today's Monday, what's today, the 30th? Monday the 30th, and if you came back tomorrow, it would say today's Tuesday the 31st. So the idea is that this block of code, when we go out to the server to get this HTML page, at the moment we're asking the server for it. The server will actually, before it sends us this code, will replace this, take this, what's in red, and replace it with a line like this, and then send the page back to us. Competitors to this concept, the concept of having your HTML page being built at the moment you ask for it. 3 years after PHP came out, Microsoft came out with its product called Active Server Pages. So maybe you've gone to websites and you've seen pages that end in .asp. And Sun Microsystems came up with Java Server Pages a year after that. And the Microsoft one runs mostly on, this is starting to change, but runs mostly on Microsoft servers, whereas the Java one runs on pretty much all servers and tries to push people to use the Java programming language, because the Java programming languages will be available on all computers, so you could push some of the code out to the client and have it run on the client. That was kind of the idea of what Java Server Pages are doing, but PHP is still popular today. And then the Perl programming language, this actually goes back to before the internet was even popular. This was a scripting language where you can just write tasks like open up a file and read some records from it and write the file to somewhere else. This really had nothing to do with the internet. But one of the things that was very interesting about the Perl programming language was it had a very good parser. So in other words, like if you wanted to type in a sentence in English and pick out the noun and the verb, it could parse that stuff very quickly. And this became very useful when the internet came out, because all people are doing on the internet is typing words in and then doing searches on those words. So it ends up being a very popular language for that, scripting language. So let's see. So Perl's role in the XAMPP, I guess we'd have to argue that's the last P, is for Perl. It handles much larger tasks than PHP. Like I say, PHP is something that you embed in HTML files that performs tasks. Generally, they're short tasks, tasks that are very quick. It goes out and gets you could use PHP to go out and get a score of a baseball game and bring that into your web page. Or PHP is also popular to connect to a database, read from a database, and display what it read. But if you're performing very large tasks, like if you have a button that sends out a mass email to all your customers, you could do that within PHP, but that would get very messy. It'd be a long piece of code embedded into a small file, and generally PHP is meant for stuff that appears in a web page, whereas Perl could be used to perform very large tasks. And Perl can connect to a database just like PHP can, but it can do like a lot of updates. And so for example, data mining test, let's say you were like Facebook, and you have hundreds of millions of people, and a bunch of people just agreed to become friends with each other, and then you want to make suggestions. Well, if you're friends with this person, you might want to be friends with that person. That could be a task that maybe you do at the end of a day, where you go and get all the updates for that day and then process those. So that could be something you do like in a Perl script, not to do like just as a page is being, as web page is being requested. So I just want to kind of go over a diagram of how like the processing of this works. So let's just say, for example, we have, here's you, you're on your PC, and you want to connect to a web server to get a web page. So we're going to have the internet here. This cloud is the internet, and you're going to send a message through the internet to a HTTP server. This is a server that's going to return a page to you. So we'll have a page sitting on this server called index.php, and your goal is to get that page. Your goal is to go here and grab this page. But this page is going to have some content in it that's going to be put together at the moment you ask for it. So, and this is actually a JavaScript that's running right now. So I have a series of pictures, and then after a certain amount of time, the next picture will show up. So right now, your request goes into the internet. So you're typing into the internet, you're typing in something like http www.facebook.com. That message gets sent into the internet. So the internet has a collection of tables, and these tables for .com is one company who is assigned to that one, and .net's another one. I forget which company, they all take turns updating those. But they have a translation table that says this string gets translated to the IP address of a certain machine. And then all the machines, including fax machines and servers, database servers, web servers, everything that's connected to the internet has its own unique number. And your request would then end up getting routed to its destination. So when you type HTTP, that means you're asking for a web page. You're not connecting to a file server, you're not connecting to a database server, you're connecting to a web server. So the address gets translated to a machine, and you can now find that machine. You're coming into this website and you're asking for a particular HTML file that's on this server. So if you type www.facebook.com and didn't say / the name of the file you're interested in, then we have the whole paradigm of what default folder and what file should we ask for. So the default is that there should be a folder on the server called public_HTML, and in that folder there should be a file called index, and it's going to be index.something. It could be index.html, it could be index.php, it could be index.asp or JSP, but the server is going to be configured for whatever the default is. If the file happens to end in .php, then what we're going to need to do before we send the file back to you, we're going to run through a Php processor which resides on the server. So what that's doing is it's taking away anything, if there happens to be in this file is going to be basically an HTML file with now this new additional tag, the PHP tag. So any blocks, and you can have many of them if you want in that file, any blocks that have PHP code in them, this process, which is running on the server, will remove those blocks. And if the instructions in those blocks of code want to replace it with legitimate HTML, that can happen. We could put legitimate HTML back into your HTML page before we go and send it somewhere. Well, of all the things you could do in your code is you can actually go out to anywhere. You can go out to anywhere on the internet. You could go to ESPN server and get some scores of sports games. Or you can even make a request to your own MySQL server which doesn't necessarily have to be on the same machine as this server. It could be on a different server. It's common that it'll be on the same server, but a lot of times bigger companies won't do that. So your PHP block can then send a request through the internet to your MySQL server. And let's say your MySQL server has a database on it with an employees table and an appointments table and some users table. So you have your customers and who your employees are, what appointments. Maybe your customers make appointments with your employees and you need an appointments table. So you can send a statement through the internet. You'd have to actually log into the server because you want to have login so random people can't just access the data. And the password is going to be known in the PHP block over here. And then you can log into the database and then run an SQL statement. The SQL statement, the SQL processor, is now running the statement you sent in, and it's reading through all the tables and gathering up all the information and developing that report. So like if we had the example before, we had the report where we're asking for the first name and the email address of different people who had an appointment at your company or with your company. So the report comes back by the SQL processor, and then that result, which is now a report, will get sent back to whoever asked for it. Who's asking for it is this PHP processor, which is processing your index.html file. So once that report has gotten together, after it processes the SQL statement, the answer could be sent, the whole answer could be sent back through the internet to the server that asked for it. So now in your block of PHP code, if your PHP code wants to use MySQL Server, it coded up the password and the user of this SQL Server, logged into it, and then sent in an SQL statement, a query. The answer got built over here, and now the answer, which could be very large, is now being sent back to the server. This code would then have to be waiting for the answer to come back and then have some code that kind of reads through and says, oh, send an email to George at this email address saying your appointment's been canceled. Then send another email to Jerry and say your appointment's been canceled. And could handle that whole task. And then maybe what this processor would do is then having the results that the results that happened during that processing. It could decide to send you a message saying like all the emails were successful, or give you some kind of an error report if they weren't successful. So once the PHP preprocessor has removed all the PHP blocks and then replaced them with possibly replace them with HTML, legitimate HTML code, this file has now been converted into what is 100% totally HTML, an HTML file, and then it can send the reply back through the internet to you. So if you went to log into a page and the page needed to go out to the database and make some query and then take the results and build it back into the web page, and eventually gets to you and you see the content that was in the database. And then once the page gets back to you, you still have a connection to the server, but the server's not doing any work on your behalf. The page could have had embedded in it a scripting language that can run on your machine, and the most popular one for that is JavaScript. And JavaScript could just be running on your machine, which would not take up any of the time on the server. So that's basically how a web page gets rendered at the moment you ask for it, using the XAMPP technology. And if you wanted to, you could put your code, your MySQL server and your HTTP server on the same machine. And actually, that's the most common thing to do, is download it, have, work out all the details of your website on the same machine. And you don't even have to go out to the internet to connect to your MySQL server. You could have it just connect to your own machine. So that's just kind of a quick overview of it. And if for some reason you had buttons on your web page that, you hit a button like mail every customer, that you might not want to put into a PHP script. You might want to have that be like a separate Perl, or what's called a Perl script. So that's really kind of a judgment call when you use it as PHP and when you use it as Perl. But PHP usually is stuff that you eventually see on a web page, whereas Perl is used for doing large tasks. So this is just like a quick overview of things we've talked about. Any question about any? This is how it works, and the JavaScript stuff really was untouched by the PHP processor. JavaScript code runs right through it, goes back untouched. The only thing that ever gets touched is anything in a PHP block. Everything else just passes right through it. Okay, so like I say, you can do dynamic content using like PHP, ASP, and JSP. All the tasks that we're going to do and we could do in Perl could be done on a web server in many other programming languages like Java and C++. All those languages are open for it. But you end up having to buy compilers for those or downloading the compilers for free and configuring them. But this is like the quickest way to get websites up and running. And it's all 100% free. So, and like I say, companies like Facebook and Google and Wikipedia and Twitter, those sites were all developed using this technology. Yeah?
I have a question.
Okay.
What's the major difference again between HTML and PHP?
So basically, there's hardly any difference. That's a very popular trick question. Basically says this. Maybe going over this not trick question, but like, I don't know, test question. If you have a file that ends in .php and it contains 100% straight HTML code, no PHP code, and you went to read that page, what would you see compared, what effect would the name have being PHP? What effect would that have? And it would end up being no effect. Right? I don't know if that made it more confusing or not, but maybe let me bring up is it this? So basically, let's say this was an HTML file, and instead of what you see in red, suppose this said Wednesday the 15th. It just manually we typed in the words Wednesday the 15th. If we went to look at this website, it would say Wednesday the 15th. It would just be one web page that says Wednesday the 15th on it, and it would be highlighted. Each one is a highlight. If we came back 3 days from now, it would say Wednesday the 15th. It'll always say Wednesday the 15th, no matter what day it is. But if we wanted the page that every time we go and look at it, we wanted it to change, to say Thursday the 16th and Friday the 17th, what we'd want to do is, well, one thing we could do is we could, every day at midnight, we could log in and update it. Say today's Thursday at midnight, Friday, we'll log in at midnight, say Thursday the 16th, and then log in the next night and change it to Friday the 17th. But if we wanted it to just constantly change as the server's clock changed, we could say inside a PHP block, which is delimited by the less than question mark followed by PHP, and it ends with a question mark greater than sign. Everything between that is your way of providing instructions to the HTTP server to say replace everything you see in red with the result of its instructions. And echo means just print back whatever you have, whatever gets generated. And there's a date command that says, today's date would be Wednesday the 15th. So if you came to look at this site tomorrow, it would say, today is, then this block in red would get replaced with Thursday the 16th. And then, so tomorrow it would have that date. But the idea is becomes very, very powerful because everything that's in black will never change. That'll always be straight HTML. That'll never change. But the stuff that I labeled in red can be replaced with whatever you tell it to replace it to. So now we could do things inside these blocks. We could, like I say, you could log into a ESPN website and get, they have a language called XML where you can get feeds that they give out for free. Let's say some baseball scores, up-to-minute baseball scores. You could read those scores and then formulate them, change the HTML around so it looks nice and have that print out. So the idea is every time somebody goes to your web page, portions of your web page are built at the moment they ask for them. Not at the moment the person who created the HTML file hit save, but at the moment it's asked for, that section of the page was built. And then the reason why PHP ties in so well with MySQL is you don't have to go out to ESPN's website to get data. You can create your own data in a database. And then you can read from your own database. So you could create a social networking site where people log into your web page, give information, you record it in your MySQL database, and then when you go look, someone else looks at another page, you read from the database and display what's been recorded. So yeah, so this example doesn't use MySQL. It's just using a function that comes with PHP, which talks to the server and just says, basically says to the server what time is it, whatever answer comes back. These fields just tell us which. In the date function, there's many, many fields that comes back. It's the day of the week, the abbreviation for the day of the week, the day of the month, the year, hours, minutes, seconds. A ton of data comes back. And out of all the data that comes back, we can ask which fields we want to see. But taking this concept and combining it with MySQL, which will be your personal database for your website, it becomes very powerful. So we could use PHP blocks to check your database to see if someone's password is correct and then allow them to log in. We could make updates to that password, which is why I was saying I don't think SQL is a great name for the language. It should be Structured Database Interaction Language, something like that, because it does more than just querying, actually updating the database. Any other questions about, so again, this is just the package, and then what we're doing in our course is going over like each of the parts of the package separately. But you can just, it's really easy. We can't do it here at the school because the school blocks us from downloading onto the PCs. Otherwise, I would do that. That would be a good thing to do, is go download XAMPP onto the PC and then just turn it all on. And the whole process takes like 5 minutes, so. But we'll be blocked from doing it on these PCs. So, and the other thing also, I mean, you could go on YouTube. There's always people doing like 5-6 minute videos on how to download XAMPP onto your PC and turn it all on. And they change it every 9 months or so. So anything we went over now, 9 months from now, it might be done differently. So, but it's always easy to do. And the programming languages PHP and Perl are very similar. If you get comfortable with one, you'll find the other one to be very comfortable with too. So, and any other questions about? Pretty much every database in the world is made up of HTML pages. It would be very boring if they were not dynamic, so almost always they're going to be PHP, ASP, or JSP. And without a doubt, they'll be talking to a database, reading and writing from their own database, in addition to going out into the internet and grabbing information from other servers too. But that'll be pretty much every database, every website you'll see. will have some database to it, some, and one or many programming languages associated with the website. Okay, anything else on the XAMPP? Like I said, it used to be called LAMPP. It originally came out for the Linux operating system. It's also sometimes referred to as a stack. So you might see job ads. Let me just try that. I'm going to just try Googling, not Googling, go on dice.com. And so dice.com is basically a website where companies and people, Holly Davidson, but it's IT staff. A friend of mine works for Holly Davidson. But anyway, so you can do searches on job titles and or keywords. So I'm just curious to see what the XAMPP 37 jobs. So let's see. Oh, okay, so I guess it's starting to be popular to now not use Apache server, but different servers. So maybe it's just XMPP, take out the Apache part. So let's see, there's a job at Harvard University. Well, I was hoping I would mention all the parts of XAMPP separately, but it's not. We'll just see if one of the other ones has it. Well, okay, so I guess maybe the companies aren't just maybe the companies just aren't asking for the, asking for people with XAMPP skills, but the skills do show up. It's basically like down here at the bottom. This is for a job at eBay. They're looking for people who know Perl. Python was the other language that I said is becoming the new popular, not replacement, but add-on to the two P's. So maybe it's XAMPP now will be the new acronym. XML, we'll cover this a little bit later in the class, and then MySQL. XML is a language where the server's not serving up the whole HTML page, but maybe just a snippet of an HTML page, maybe just to get a score of a baseball game or something like that. You just receive that, reformat that into HTML and display it. But, so yeah, knowledge of networks and application servers, firewalls, and databases. So, these are basically the topics, and like I say, everything in the XAMPP set is, there's some other thing that you could buy and pay for, and it's supposedly better, but this seems to be very popular now. You could develop websites that are as big as Facebook now using this technology, and it can handle it. Okay,